This is a tier list of every Warbond in Helldivers 2, and this is the newest one, known as Chemical Agents. Today, we'll be ranking each one on 3 criteria: fun, fashion, and function. Each one will get a score in these 3 categories, and the average score will determine where on the tier list it goes, so you can make the best decision on the Warbond that's right for you. Starting off with the most recent Warbond, Chemical Agents offers a unique approach to gameplay, focusing on caustic gas weapons. With stratagems like the TX-41 Sterilizer and the AX-TX-13 Dog Breath, players can melt faces off their enemies and buy themselves some time to react, as the gas causes a stunning and blinding effect to all enemies. However, the distance covered by the Sterilizer is unimpressive, and on higher difficulties, this might be an issue, with players often getting overwhelmed by hordes of Terminids or automatons. The Dog Breath stratagem is useful to a point, but as you might have seen in your own gameplay, it can do more harm to you or your teammates than anyone else. Thankfully, the devs did include 2 shiny new armor sets that mitigate the effects of toxic gas, but fall short in terms of usefulness, as they don't offer any other benefits. Once again, not great for high-level missions. The gas grenade and stim pistol do offer redeeming qualities, since you can keep one on you in exchange for more effective support stratagems like the autocannon or the MG43 machine gun, but they do leave something to be desired, especially since the stim pistol becomes your secondary, potentially robbing you of life-saving bullets when your primary fails you. In terms of fun, the natural gas extraction and ew emotes offer a lot, especially when coupled with the Patient Zero's Remembrance Cape and the Expert Exterminator player title. Although the player banners and ship patterns are hardly worth mentioning, as there are a plethora of better options available in other Warbonds that we cover later. Overall, this Warbond is fun and fashionable, but not very functional, and comes with an average score of 5.6, which puts it right where it belongs, in the C tier. Moving on to the Freedom's Flame Warbond, which offers no additional stratagems, but instead gives players 3 very powerful weapons like the SG-451 Cookout, LAM-66 Torture, and the P-72 Crisper, allowing players to barbecue their way through even the highest difficulties with ease. The Cookout is an exceptional pump-action shotgun that may take some getting used to due to its lackluster fire rate, which it makes up for by pushing enemies back with each blast. This not only lets players stay safer on the battlefield, but it also feels good and bodes well for both the fun and function of this Warbond. The Torture follows closely behind, with its best defense is a good offense feel to it, and it carries a decent amount of ammo, so reloading won't be a big concern for you. The same can be said for the Crisper, which is a small but mighty flamethrower that counts as a secondary, allowing you the option to pair it with the Torture if you're feeling spicy. The Firebomb Hellpods booster is both hilarious and practical at times, allowing players to weaponize drop pods even better than before, as they explode after a short time on the ground. But that can be incredibly lethal for your fellow democracy bringers, so use with caution. Similar to the Chemical Agents Warbond, the armor included isn't very special, as it just mitigates fire damage and nothing else. Plus, they somehow look both colorful but bland, which says a lot considering some of the other armor sets in the game. However, the Fire Safety Officer title provides a humorous twist on typical ranks and has a cool looking badge to go with it, which, when coupled with the Breach Cape and player card, offer a nice, fashionable flame look. Lastly, the emotes included are some of the more entertaining ones we've seen in a while, with the Thoracic Exaltation Maneuver being a common favorite among players. Based on everything we've seen so far, this Warbond is a lot of fun, decently fashionable, and pretty functional. With an overall score of 7.2, this collection sits comfortably in the B tier. The Viper Commando Warbond was the center of controversy when it first released, as it was one of the more expensive collections, requiring 679 medals to fully unlock. This, coupled with the fact that skins and player cards are very bland in appearance, did not help the devs regain any lost traction from earlier this year. However, the 2 weapons included do provide some fun, as the Liberator Carbine isn't the worst weapon, and the Bushwhacker Shotgun does provide some hefty firepower in case of an emergency, allowing you to fire up to 3 slugs at a time when you need. The armor sets are very middle of the road, as they only give players moderately better weapon handling and a 50% buff to melee damage, which, when coupled with the K2 throwing knife, can be lethal but not practical when facing hordes of enemies. The only real highlights from this Warbond are the Experimental Infusion Booster, which allows players to maintain full health and run a little faster shortly after using a stim, and the included victory poses, which are kind of fun. It seems the developers made this Warbond to poke fun at the community's initial reaction to enduring the Battle of Malevelon Creek, as many new players called it, quote, Robot Vietnam. But that still doesn't fix how bland this collection is. Overall, it's not great. It's lacking fun, has no real fashion, and barely has any function for new players. So it gets a 3.3 total score and proudly sits in the F tier, making this our worst ranked Warbond yet. But hold on tight, because here comes the Polar Patriots Warbond. The name of this collection is a little deceptive, as it makes you think the armor might have something to do with the cold, but you'd be wrong. Instead, players can find a variety of options, such as the Winter Warrior armor, which is very heavy, but does come with servo-assisted perks, meaning you can chuck grenades from miles away, and feel a little safer knowing you have 50% extra health on your limbs. The Kodiak armor allows players to hunker down and take the full brunt of whatever comes their way, as it's also heavy, but provides 50% resistance to explosive damage and a 30% increase in accuracy when crouching or prone. And for those who think FPS stands for first-person sneaker, there's the Arctic Ranger armor, which reduces enemy visibility of the player by 30% and pings the map periodically so you don't walk into a mess by accident. Not to mention, it's also light as a feather, which comes in handy for those much-needed cross-map sprints to extraction. Weapon-wise, this Warbond does pretty well, with the Plaz 101 Purifier being the only disappointment, as it's a charge weapon, so you might get caught red-handed a few times, but the P113 Verdict and the AR-61 Tenderizer are very popular choices for their fire rate, damage, and reload times. Also, for those burdened with the weight of carrying an SSSD, or if you just want to run one-handed for fun, the SMG-72 Pummeler isn't a bad option, but its burst fire mechanic does make it very meh in terms of SMGs. Another great weapon offered is the Incendiary Impact Grenade, which has pretty good damage and an immediate detonation, so there's no need to wait for explosive democracy when you're surrounded, but it does pay to be careful. No one likes a traitor. The developers also had the player in mind when they included the Motivational Shocks booster, which allows players to resist slowing effects from things like acid attacks, which can be a real pain when you've got 4,000 bile spewers on your tail. This Warbond also includes 3 charming victory poses like Call the Helldivers and Mime Instrumentation, although why this wasn't just called air guitar isn't exactly clear. Fashion-wise, it's not bad, but not great. The main redeeming quality here is the Pinions of Everlasting Glory cape and card combo, but other than that, there's room for improvement. Overall, this is a good first purchase for new players, as it offers a ton of fun and function, but maybe find your fashion somewhere else. So it gets a solid 6.3, cementing it properly in the lower B tier. Arguably one of the most explosive battle passes to be released is the Democratic Detonation Warbond. This collection features some very appealing armor sets like the Groundbreaker, which reduces recoil by 30% when crouched or prone, and lets the player carry 2 extra grenades. The same goes for the Demolition Specialist, but it's much lighter, allowing for greater speed. Then there's the aptly named Devastator armor, which is the heaviest, but offers an interesting trade-off. Instead of carrying more grenades, you get a 50% reduction to incoming explosive damage. Pair that with its 150 armor rating, and you're basically a juggernaut. This Warbond also features some of the best weapons so far, such as the Adjudicator, which penetrates medium armor and has a solid rate of fire, the Grenade Pistol, which doubles as a second utility for those who want all of the explosive power, and the whimsical but still practical Exploding Crossbow, which is great for those cross-map attacks. All of which feel great to use and provide massive amounts of damage for the player. The only not-so-great weapon available is the Eruptor, which seems like it should be great given its medium armor penetration and beefy damage, but it falls short due to being bolt action only, meaning you likely won't use this on anything higher than a level 5 mission. Since 2 out of 3 armor sets give you extra grenades, it's worth mentioning the incredible effectiveness of the Thermite Grenade. With its staggering 2,000 total damage and long-lasting effect, this utility will eliminate most armored targets when paired with any of the weapons in this collection. A very underrated booster is also included in this Warbond. The Expert Extraction Pilot shortens the time needed for your Pelican to arrive, saving you precious seconds in those high-intensity moments. Players will also find 3 victory poses, 2 of which are pretty fun, such as the Boxer and Courtly Bow, and a classic but authoritative Squat. Despite having a much darker color scheme than previously covered Warbonds, Democratic Detonation stands out with beautifully intricate designs in both armor and player cards, which, when paired with the Freedom's Tapestry cape, are sure to catch the loving eyes of your Democratic leaders and colleagues. So it's fun, fashionable, and very functional, making this the highest rated Warbond so far and our first S-tier collection. The next Warbond is a bit of a mixed bag. Despite the name Cutting Edge, it's really anything but. Every armor set included is fine, but disappoints in terms of function, as they all do the same thing: mitigate shocks. Nothing else. Sure, that can be useful if your random teammate places a Tesla tower a little too close to extraction, but you can always just shoot the base and remind them not to be reckless. And by now, many players have learned to outright avoid bringing the Tesla tower for fear of causing a mission to fail. But let's talk guns. The two best in the pack are the ARC-12 Blitzer for its pump action shock effects and chain reaction damage, and the LAS-16 Sickle, which was the meta for a while for a reason. It's a powerful energy-based weapon that, if used carefully, will never run out of ammo. Just watch that temperature on the bottom left and you'll be fine. The other two weapons are the SG-8P Punisher Plasma and the LAS-7 Dagger. The Punisher Plasma isn't terrible, but it combines two elements that aren't really needed: a pump-action shotgun and energy-based ammunition similar to a grenade. The fire rate is poor at best, and the arc from each round fired makes it hard to judge when under duress, so it'll hurt you more than the enemy. The dagger seems like a great idea, but its quick tendency to overheat and comparably lower damage won't make it worth your while. You're better off carrying the laser cannon and running with a different secondary like the Verdict or the Redeemer, which we'll get to later. Including the Sickle, the two best offerings from this Warbond are Localization Confusion, which increases the time delay for the enemy spawn rates by 10%, and the G23 Stun Grenade, which stops most enemies in their tracks and can get you out of a pinch in a hurry. Just be careful where you throw it. This collection is also very bland in appearance, aside from the armor and one cape known as the Bot Slayer, which has a nice sandy appearance along with its military rank-inspired stripes. The only victory pose worth mentioning is the Shotgun Show, which is delightfully flashy, but the other two are meh overall, which really doesn't bode well for the fun or fashion aspect of this Warbond. All in all, it has some practical weapons and one good grenade, along with a very disappointing color palette, so it gets a combined score of 5.3, or a super F. Just buy the Sickle and call it a day. One of the earliest Warbonds to drop with the game was the Steeled Veterans Collection, which is arguably one of the more balanced releases we've seen from Arrowhead. If you're looking to feel like a space cowboy, the P4 Senator has you covered. It's a high-damage 6-shooter that makes you feel like Yosemite Sam. Depending on the situation, it's not always practical, but hey, it's fun. It feels deadly when you hit a proper headshot on a rogue automaton trooper, making it hard not to smile. Then there's the ARC-23C Liberator Concussive, which offers pretty good damage coupled with a stunning effect on your targets, meaning you can push your way through to the next objective without worry. Naturally, we couldn't avoid covering the beloved Breaker Incendiary, which garnered attention during the early days of the game, and for good reason. It's a rapid-fire shotgun that burns everything it touches, meaning bugs standing in your way are soon to be charred and scarred. The only letdown is the deceptively named Jar 5 Dominator, which fires rocket-propelled projectiles but suffers from having almost no ammo, meaning you'll be reloading a lot. Sure, it packs a punch, but what happens when your teammates call a supply drop on the other side of the map while you're getting samples? The G10 Incendiary isn't bad, but often needs to be paired with other weapons to be fully effective. It also has a longer fuse time than its impactful cousin, so you're better off with something else entirely. In terms of boosters, the flexible reinforcement budget is another great idea on paper, but when applied in a high-octane scenario, it just doesn't work. It decreases the time needed to call in reinforcements after they're depleted by a measly 10%, which comes out to 12 seconds. Is that 12 seconds worth 75 medals to you? Only you can decide. Armor-wise, it's not a bad collection. All three armors are visually pleasing and are servo-assisted, so you get a rocket of an arm and some additional limb health, but nothing else. And for once, the player cards are outshining the capes, with Posterity's Gratitude and the Bastion of Integrity cards looking sleek and presentable. The capes are okay, but there's better options out there. The victory poses are pretty good this time around, with Roll 'em and You're Next being the two best ones. But at 32 medals and being on the third page, Your Next could be pretty pricey for any player to get. The weapons alone make this collection a blast, and they're all pretty functional, but the fashion falls a bit shorter than other Warbonds we've seen, so it'll get a solid 8, placing it in the A tier. And now it's time for the largest and most expensive Warbond, which was dropped on release: Helldivers Mobilize. This collection costs a staggering 2,015 medals to complete and has 10 pages, which is a challenge in and of itself. For new players, the choices might seem overwhelming, but the armor sets included are actually some of the best in the game. For starters, there's the Infiltrator armor, which has some subtle flair to go along with its sneaky perks, allowing you to slip past enemies from up to 30% further away. But if you're looking for a more tanky approach, there's the Marksman armor. offering a stout 150 armor rating that lets you take explosions to the face without blinking an eye and steady your weapon with a nice 30% nerf to recoil when crouched to prone. The only downside is you'll feel like you're running through the mud constantly, but that can be said for any heavy armor. On the other hand, the Trench Engineer armor is a nice middle ground, offering the same perks as the Marksman, but 2 extra grenades instead of explosive resistance and a little more movement being a medium set. And it has a nice color palette for those looking to stand out on the battlefield. If you decide to get the Stim Pistol and want to volunteer as your team's full-time healer, the badass sounding Bone Snapper armor is a nice heavy set that lets you carry 2 extra stims and increases stim duration on yourself by 2 extra seconds, which can often mean life or death in high-level missions. Pair this with the experimental drug booster from earlier, and you'll be the deadliest medic Super Earth has ever seen. In a more ostentatious fashion, you've got the Hero of the Federation armor set, boasting a beautiful gold lining that comes with a unique perk for you avid gamblers. You will have a 50% chance to survive any lethal damage that comes your way, and it'll keep you from bleeding out when you take torso damage. And even if you don't survive the coin toss, at least you look cool when you die. Another uniquely fashionable heavy armor set is the Battle Master armor. It offers the same perks as the Marksman set, so it may not be your favorite, but its asymmetrical design does make it interesting to look at. Following through this sneaky approach to missions is the almost alien-looking Trailblazer Scout armor, which is fairly popular for its looks alone. Once again, same perks as another set from earlier, but it's just a little lighter, meaning you can run slightly faster, which you will notice. And those 2 beady eyes give off a real space assassin vibe. Now, if you're looking for a little more padding when sneaking around, the Combat Technician armor would be your best bet. With an armor rating of 100 and eye-catching orange undertones, this set offers a great balance between stealth and survivability. For those who love playing the medic but want something faster than the Bone Snapper, the Physician armor is something worth grinding toward. It's a medium armor set with the same perks, so you can remain mobile in times of crisis, but it's not the prettiest set in this list. An armor set that is rarely used but can be a flex to your friends who actually touch grass. There's the Champion of the People armor. With its eggshell white coloration and gold highlights, it offers an almost angelic appearance. However, it offers the same perks as the Hero of the Federation set, so it may not be worth grinding to get. That all comes down to you and your preferences, but it does look really good. There are a total of 12 weapons in this Warbond, but honestly, only 5 are really worth your time. In order from easiest to acquire to hardest, here they are. The P19 Redeemer was mentioned earlier, as it is easily the best pistol for newbies and seasoned veterans alike. It offers pretty solid damage numbers with an insane rate of fire, so if you're caught off guard, a quick mag dump should get you out of a jam. The only negative is the ammo capacity. 31 rounds is a lot, but when firing at 1100 rounds per minute, you can rip through your stash in a hurry. Still, it's a reliable, idiot-proof backup for those who don't have time to think and need to run. Couple that with the SG-225 Breaker automatic shotgun, and you've got yourself a lethal combo. In terms of damage, the Breaker does pretty well, and was a preferred primary for many at launch. The only 2 issues are the mag size, and the fact that it, well, has magazines to begin with. With its high rate of fire and small 16-round mag size, you can run out of ammo in less than 3 seconds. So it packs a punch, but it can leave you hanging if you're not careful. However, one weapon that needs almost no introduction, being a long-time community favorite, is the AR-23P Liberator Penetrator. With a 30-round capacity and medium armor penetrating capability, this rifle can level even the toughest threats to democracy. Sure, its high rate of fire might force you to reload a lot, but that armor penetration can help buy you some time. Couple that with a stun grenade and you'll be just fine. Similarly, the SG-225 Breaker Spray and Pray is also a community favorite, as it puts a fun twist on its first rendition. Carrying 10 extra rounds and boasting an extra 30 damage than its predecessor, the Spray and Pray wipes out anything in its path, with its specialty being crowd control. So if you're pinned down on the objective waiting for support, make sure you have one of these in your arsenal and clear a path to victory. As for the remaining weapons in this Warbond, it's not great. The Punisher shotgun does fantastic damage, but it's pump action and slow to fire, which could leave you out in the cold even when you need it most. But it reloads rounds individually, which could be helpful if it didn't take forever. The Diligence Marksman Rifle seems like a nice concept, but if you're surrounded by a crowd, and you often will be, you'll find yourself overwhelmed in an instant. The Defender SMG is okay, but it could be better. In fact, most SMGs in the game are fairly unimpressive. The Defender could be useful for carrying items like the SSSD, but other than that, it's not anything special. The LAS-5 Scythe, not to be confused with the Sickle, isn't bad for handling Shriekers and other long-range targets with its straight beam. However, it overheats in about 8 seconds, and while the Sickle overheats in 7 seconds, round for round, it does more damage, making the Scythe hardly worth anyone's time. In the interest of not beating a dead horse, here are the stats on the last two weapons: the Slugger shotgun with its remarkably creative pump action mechanic, and the Scorcher, a futuristic looking but disappointing plasma rifle with the most anemic ammo capacity possible. Moving on to the grenades in this Warbond, the G6 Frag and G16 Impact are two great staples for any Helldiver, with the Impact grenade being a crowd clearer and the Frag being perfect for clearing bug holes and automaton fabricators. The G3 Smoke is hardly worth mentioning, as you're better off just using the Orbital Smoke Strike to cover a much larger area. The boosters in this collection speak for themselves, with Hellpod space optimization being pretty much a legal requirement on all missions, but Vitality enhancement doesn't fall far behind, as it's always nice to have a little extra protection. The UAV Recon booster isn't bad, but it's not really necessary, as most people were born with two functioning eyes and should instead opt for the Stamina Enhancement booster to better prepare you for cross-map marathons. And then there's Muscle Enhancement, which sounds good on paper, but really isn't as special, as you don't often run through massive troves of mud, bushes, or otherwise, so save your medals and let someone else run it. The increased reinforcement budget is pretty handy to have if you're either running level 7 or higher, or you don't have faith in your teammates. This Warbond also contains some pretty cool emotes and victory poses, with rock, paper, scissors, and the Scout handshake standing out. Fashion-wise, this Warbond offers some shiny armor sets and only a couple player cards worth looking at, but it's not a bad collection overall. So now that we've sorted through 10 pages of overwhelming democratic debauchery, let's run the numbers. There's plenty to be desired in terms of fashion, but there's a lot of fun and function to be found in this Warbond, so it gets a healthy but controversial 7 out of 10, just barely securing its spot in the A tier. And with that, we have our perfectly accurate and irrefutably correct tier list. See you next time.